Hey everybody, Joe Morrison, 49SAF Pod. I'm attempting my first outdoor intro recording. And so you'll probably get some street noise, but wanted to try it. It's just one of those days. Listen, I'm so sorry. It's been 2 months. What happened? COVID happened. And it affected everybody. It affected people and organizations, and it affected our organization too. You know, we tried to help out in areas where we could at the municipality. We tried to execute on mission, and we tried to set up a strategy related to the COVID crisis and how we deploy capital. And we've done that starting today, so more on that in a bit. But let's talk a little bit about this podcast before we get to our news. We talk with Jani Tuomi of Imaware and Jacqueline Summers of HealthTie. Jani is a health tech entrepreneur who found himself founding a health tech company because of a personal experience he had in the medical world. And we hear from him, we hear from Jacqueline, and how she's been working for 2 years to put together people like Jani with the healthcare providers who could use his services. So she's trying to match technology and solutions to problems and be a connector in that fashion. She's based in Alaska, and we all know Alaska is a robust testing ground for all kinds of technology. And we could use more health tech, given that we're so geographically isolated. All right. So the final thing is, what is this co-investment program? You can find it online at 49saf.com apply. And so for any Alaska company that has an investor, any startup that's Alaskan that has an investor, we're matching capital. $10,000 minimum, $25,000 maximum is near automatic with dollar for dollar private cash equity or equity-like investment that's out there. If you've got that, we'll match it. We'll match the private terms. We are going to conduct light diligence. The deal has to be reasonable. That said, we really want to get this capital out into the community. If you're going to do a deal between $25,000 and $100,000 with your private investor, we will increase underwriting but still evaluate that. As part of this program, we are prioritizing Black, Indigenous, and person of color owned businesses. All requirements and details are online at 49saf.com/apply. Listen, if you've thought about building a business, if you've taken 2 or 3 shots and they didn't work out, now's the time to get back out there. Now's the time to be an entrepreneur and start up. And here's why. It's a time of disruption. It's a time of change. And business is going to be done differently with new business models. Technology companies are winning for the first time in a downturn, probably. Get out there and get disruptive. And let's listen to some disruptors right about now. Here's the 49SAF pod. We'll get better about posting. Look for us every month. Here we go. We're joined today by Jani Tuomi. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Jani Tuomi, Jacqueline Summers, and the great Aaron Bacher returning to the 49SAF. So excited. And Jacqueline and Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do and what you're working on. And then, also talk a little bit about how COVID's changed your life. So Jacqueline, you're up.
Sure. I'm Jacqueline Summers, and I'm here representing HealthTie today. I'm the managing director of HealthTie, and what we are a healthcare hub that really tries to solve problems in Alaska related to healthcare. So COVID has really changed our approach. We introduce organizations to healthcare entrepreneurs like Jani who can make a difference in Alaska. And what we found is that it's really sped up the adoption of these technologies and things simply because people have to. So I think prior to COVID, there was a slow adoption. Sometimes cultures were hard to change and convince that this would be beneficial. And now in crisis, there's opportunity, and people are really finding that when they have to make changes, they will. So I would say, COVID has been quite difficult, obviously, for everyone involved. However, one thing that has happened is it's opened hearts and minds as to what we can do differently.
Erin, what do you think?
Oh boy, that's hard to follow up. So I am the program manager at 49th State Angel Fund, and I was actually, though I had been working at the municipality's emergency operations center, I was able to take an hour and watch Jani's presentation on HealthTie. So pretty excited about what HealthTie has been able to bring to Alaska, and how well Jacqueline's been able to connect our community with really super innovative and what are all of the adjectives to describe it, but it's just I feel connected through HealthTie to the rest of the world and the startups that are working on solving big problems. As I had previously mentioned, I got pulled away for 5 weeks to work for the municipality's emergency response, which was pretty fascinating. Behind the curtains look at how quickly our government agency can respond to a once in 100-year pandemic, and was able to work on the team that put together our data dashboards and our website, and to help keep our public informed. And we worked in coordination with the University of Alaska Anchorage and the epidemiologists there who helped build our models. And testing is paramount. It is the method by which, or the way in which, we're going to be able to navigate this crisis going forward. It's the only way until we come up with a vaccine. So I'm very excited to be part of this conversation.
And Jani, tell us about Microdrop, Imaware, and the products you have and products around this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Jani. I'm one of the founders of Microdrop. That's the name of our company, based out of Houston, Texas. And we built Imaware, a platform for health awareness. And we actually originally were nowhere near kind of respiratory viruses and COVID-19. We were performing tests for autoimmune conditions and cardiovascular disease and prediabetes. And kind of in February, when we saw that this virus was spreading and coming across the ocean, we felt that we needed to pivot our platform a little bit and offer the at-home experience with our telemedicine doctors and kind of the Uber nurses that could come to your door to facilitate health collection, swabbing, and the like that. So we needed to kind of take that platform and respond to COVID-19 in the Houston area. And then, we've been expanding across Texas to identify and test and help people recover, who otherwise may not have access to public testing services. So we're really kind of focused on elderly and disabled people who are, kind of homebound and may not have another testing option to go get tested.
And so if I want to get tested with Imaware, and recognizing right now this is only available in Texas, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so hey, we've got one listener in Texas, and you're trying to expand, so that's great. But right now, available in the state of Texas, you offer a in-home product with some remote doctor assistance. Tell us about it and tell us how it works and how we can get it.
Yeah, and again, all of our other products are actually 49 and 50 state eligible, but this COVID-19 nasopharyngeal test, the Q-tip kind of up your nose, it needs that trained healthcare professional to come to your home and deliver it. So that kind of slows down scale a bit. And so we wanted to focus on Texas, obviously seeing that there's companies doing great work in California and Washington and New York, where the other kind of hotspots are. And so the idea is that if you come to our website and go through the quiz, you can get kind of self-selected into a risk profile. We're seeing, of the tens of thousands of people who've come to our site, that 95% of people are low risk. So they don't have symptoms, they don't have exposure, they're younger, and they don't have some existing condition. And then the last 5% is kind of the area we focus on. People who have existing conditions, cardiovascular disease or autoimmune conditions, are over the age of 50 and have been, either exposed or have demonstrated some symptoms. And so with those people, they can come, and get the test purchased, and we deploy somebody within 24 hours and often same day to go to their home and do that sample collection. These healthcare professionals get geared up in PPE and perform this sample within 5 minutes and then exit the home. So that's what we've been focused on doing. And on the backs of kind of that NP swab test, we'll be offering an home-based antibody test in the coming weeks that will help people understand if they have had it, if they currently have it, and if they have immunity for potentially a future viral infection. So we're excited by that test, and that test will be available in 49 states minus New York.
How long does it take you to create a test for your in-home care? So your primary product is Imaware essentially is a range of products that allow in-home testing, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you launched a COVID swab product. Now you're launching a COVID antibody product. And you're saying the COVID antibody product will be available in 49 out of 50 states?
Yep.
So how long does that take you to do from concept to launch?
So in most tests where there are well-defined biomarkers or kind of information in your blood that people understand, we basically take existing venous draw, like where you go to your lab and you get kind of your venous draw in your elbow here. We take that technology and we basically support the miniaturization of it. So instead of drawing a really big vial of blood, we draw 5 drops from your finger. And so we do these venous to cap studies, and we work with our OEMs to create assays that are able to run and analyze capillary sample. Those can be spun up in as fast as 6 to 8 weeks, and some other assays need a little more development and fine tuning and can take 3 to 6 months. And then if you're building something brand new, like there was a test that one of our advisors created that looks at this haptoglobin genotype, that was a lot longer because that was building something that had never been done before. And so those can take 6 to 12 months to design and to build and to test and to validate against existing test types, to identify big study data group and to be able to track them and make sure it's testing fine.
How old is Imaware?
So we were formed as Microdrop LLC in 2018. And for 2 years prior to that, we were operating as a private entity working on the miniaturization. So the team's been around doing this for about, in this current concept, 4 years. But some of our medical advisors have spent their entire career in miniaturization in terms of identifying biomarker data from really, really small volumes of blood.
And so when you formed as an LLC 2 years ago, how many products did you have?
So we actually launched with just one focused on celiac disease. So we were really not wanting to be like another company that was, Theranos out of California that had kind of made claims that they could test for thousands of conditions from one drop of blood. So we wanted to mitigate for that and operate quite differently. So we launched with celiac disease. We wanted to be very careful about false negatives. And so with that condition, we knew that nobody would die from it if we had provided a wrong report. And so because of the longer time frame to get diagnosed and because of this lower mortality rate associated with celiac disease, we worked with every patient who took our test to make sure that if they were positive, they went to their doctor. And if they were negative, that they were somehow able to resolve their symptoms through a different test like IBS or allergy test, so that we could make sure that the testing we provided was in fact as accurate as we claimed and thought it was. And then we actually published that into peer review in CCLM magazine, a highly respected medical journal.
My brain's a little scrambled right now. So you launched with one product for celiac disease 2 years ago. How many products do you have on the market now?
Yeah, so in January of this year, after really focusing and fine-tuning our product and the science and the way we work with patients, we added 15 more tests. using, again, very well-defined biomarkers covering prediabetes, cardiovascular disease, prostate cancer, thyroid functions, overall health and wellness. And so now we have a lot more tests on our menu.
And the value, the way you test is pretty much the same for each test, meaning that it's drops of blood for the most part, not entirely, but
yeah. Most of the time it just means pricking your finger and massaging out 3 to 5 drops of blood, and then that goes back to the lab for processing.
So one of the things that I'd like to highlight is that, we started this conversation talking about COVID-19, and yet, clearly Jani has an approach that Alaskans could benefit from regarding COVID. The other pieces, and maybe this is even more important as we drive toward just, resuming our lives, is that he has testing that is particularly relevant for those of us in Alaska who might be a long way away from a blood area or a place where we could get our blood tested. So this is the at-home testing, and the ability to do early testing in order to get information is very relevant. And what I'd like to really demonstrate is it's entrepreneurs like Jani who can really help Alaskans lower their access points for healthcare in Alaska and their price points. I think that this is a economical way for us to get healthcare here. So thank you for letting me just highlight Jani and what entrepreneurs are capable of doing just through innovation, as he's kind of been telling us about.
Well, to stay on the COVID train, one of our angel investors is fired up about testing. And he's fired up particularly about, regardless of the efficacy of tests, he's frustrated that good is the enemy of perfect. And so there are very few, if any, testing protocols in any communities really right now, in terms of testing the general population. Jani, do you have any thoughts on what communities can do to increase testing when we know there's a shortage of tests nationally?
Yeah, that's an awesome topic. I get fired up about it too, because you've got a lot of different ways to solve this, right? So even with our platform and protocols, we built a online quiz. And so we want everybody to just go through that and self-assess. Right away, like I said, 95% of people we've seen go through this score a low risk, which means that they identify as, under a certain age, they don't have existing conditions, they haven't been exposed, or they're not demonstrating symptoms. So right away, how to kind of take 95% of people out of the equation, and we can go zoom in on 5%. And with those 5%, you can deploy something like temperature monitoring. Let's we got lots of thermometers out there. So, PPE up, and let's get some of these elderly people temperature screened and monitored and watch how that symptom changes. And so if we then take, that last 5% and cut that in half, logically we can get down to 1 to 2% that should be, tested with the NP swab test. So like you mentioned, this is a multifaceted approach. And instead of trying to build the singular, blood test or spit test that, we'll never get 300 million copies of that test out there, we should be looking at a combination of cheap, easy, free, complex, in-person telemedicine, and all of those solutions in a logically laid out path will help you actually identify the high-risk individuals so that you can actually protect them. So that's the way we look at it. And when we deploy this program across like the city of Houston with the health department, or with our employer partners on rigs and oil fields and energy farms and solar factories there, we're looking at it holistically and not just saying, hey, how do we test tens of thousands of people with Q-tips? And so I couldn't agree more that when it comes to a community, it's all of us have to help all of us, right?
Jani, I'm curious about your background, because I know you probably talked about this in the HealthTie presentation, but it's really hard, even as somebody who's in the mix and relatively or pretty aware of the situation, to parse through a lot of the data and the data points, and even the antibody tests. It was recently discussed publicly that we couldn't really use that as a standard to give people, a certificate of health and that you're immune to it going forward. Or so given your background, how did you come to this type of work? How do you disseminate the information? And, do you have to have a medical background to start a medical-based startup?
That's an awesome question. So I do not have a medical background. I have a computer science background, and I build products that, I like people and people like to use. So I want to build something that's functional for people. So I've always taken technology and tried to make it work like a toaster, starting with making the computer work at home for my mom. So when we set out to build this, I was kind of the co-founder responsible for the patient experience. How do we take a scientific product invented by some great PhDs, and how do we take the MDs who are describing the clinical utility and value, and how do we disseminate that out for public consumption? So I got the opportunity to work with, these amazing doctors and researchers who've spent their careers miniaturizing, identifying conditions where biomarkers are useful for measurement. And I kind of had to learn and digest all that. And so to your point, how do we look at this? I think the idea is to certainly always do a little bit more research than maybe what is presented. So a case in point on that is the word antibody. Everybody's saying antibody test. What I think people need to say is point of care antibody test, because those little pregnancy looking devices that are, kind of plastic, 3 inches long, have a strip or two on them. That's what most people think about when you think of antibody test. And the technology to basically perform that test and to use the buffer solution to capture your blood and then have it measured is what is demonstrating a vast array of precision, from 40% accuracy to something even higher than 80%. And so we tested 10 of those different kinds of devices ourselves. And we had known positive and known negative patients through our swab testing, who we said, hey, do you want to take an antibody test for free as just part of a study? And we saw the data didn't add up. So that's where I'll say I don't have a medical background, but I have a data background. And so when I see, hey, you said you're positive here, and now you're negative with this test, that doesn't sound good, right? So when we went to work with lab partners, they use highly complex, high precision medical equipment in these devices in lab settings with trained individuals who know how to run these tests. And sure enough, when you do antibody testing in that environment, you're getting 98, 99, almost 100% accuracy and precision, sensitivity and specificity. And so that's where then you have to divide antibody tests into what were called kind of lab-based tests and point-of-care tests. And so I think antibody tests have gotten a bad rap because just when you sort of hear it out there in the general public, it's all just antibody testing, right? And so back to kind of why I got into this, I had a similar belief to what Joe mentioned, which was I got to believe that good is good enough to get into healthcare from taking care of yourself. So I had a family member who got sick, and they, the doctors were debating whether he had this or that or this or that. And they didn't run the simple blood test because they just didn't have the diagnosed symptoms that demonstrated the need to run the test. And so basically the way they looked at blood tests in 2010 was, we use a blood test to validate a condition we think this person has. And I call that sick care. So let's wait till you're sick and then let's diagnose you. And so you don't have to be a medical person to question, why didn't you run that $5 blood test when you just thought it might have been a condition, and rule it out? And so if they had run this simple blood test, they could have ruled that out, or in fact, in my brother's case, identified it 6 months earlier and actually done something about it. And so it was in that moment, having that kind of personal experience, and just somebody is, my background is always building product. I just remembered that moment, and it was like, one day I want to get into healthcare. I just don't know when. And it took 7 more years to go by. And this opportunity with our medical advisory team, who had identified this small volume blood testing, and it kind of all clicked to me. And I said, I need to take what they've now invented and turn the innovation into making consumers get this opportunity so they don't have to go through something I and my family did, which was wait until you're sick to run a simple blood test. And so that's how we got here. And that's why we're focusing on blood tests, that if you run and get an answer that says you might have this condition, you can go to your doctor sooner. And so back to Joe's point about, is good enough? That's the way we look at it. Is this screening test is not meant to diagnose. This screening test is not meant to cure you. It's just meant to help you understand your health data and get you to your doctor sooner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the way we look at it.
I'll ask Jacqueline a few questions. So, Jacqueline, why is it that you are doing HealthTie?
I'm doing HealthTie for precisely the reasons that Jani just spoke about. I think many of us have had family members who have had serious health conditions and ourselves have figured out that there's got to be a better way. And so HealthTie is a place for innovators to come and make positive changes in the healthcare environment. And it really does not matter what your entry point is. We really look at anybody involved in healthcare. So whether it's an individual or a doctor or a physician's assistant or the parent of somebody who has a condition, anyone, perhaps there's somebody who's offering health insurance, anybody who's in the system and wants to make a change, HealthTie is going to be that neutral place where we can tackle those problems together. So the reason that we're here, Alaska has, if not the highest healthcare costs in the United States, it's one of the top two. And my approach is that anything we do will make it better. So including Jani and Imaware, I'm working on implementing 7 other pilot projects in Alaska that will literally combine people with innovations with problems within our community that needs to be changed. So really, I'm inspired. One thing that I've learned from doing HealthTie is most people don't come into this environment as a healthcare entrepreneur without some incredible story. There is usually some initial event that both created the idea, but also moves them forward with passion and with purpose. And so it's really, truly exciting place to be.
Tell us about a win that you've had or something that you've enjoyed doing while you were at HealthTie.
All right. I'm happy to tell you more about that. So when we first started HealthTie, my co-founder and I, Kim Champney, came together because she had a particularly difficult problem. She was looking at trying to assist people with disabilities in their homes with their care. And there weren't enough direct support professionals or DSPs to come in and do that. And when we met, she said to me, I've been on every panel in every room. We've been studying this for 20 years, and it's never getting better. And I had just been through a series of entrepreneurial focused events, sprints and lean startup events. And I just asked her if they had ever thought of looking at their problems with kind of under the entrepreneurial lens. That initial event, our discussion about her problem launched HealthTie, but also launched a new product called DSP Hire. And so that is actually going to go into beta testing next week. So for me, that's an incredible win. And once that product goes out and people are able to connect with their direct support professionals, it will really address a hard problem in our community.
And can you explain what DSP Hire is a bit more?
Sure. It's an app that will help people who are onboarding to try to become a direct support professional go through that process much more quickly. So right now, when we first started looking at this problem, everybody was doing everything by paper. If you need to apply for fingerprinting, if you needed to apply for a job, if you needed to submit your hours, it was all being done by paper. And so DSP Hire has created a way through an app to make sure that process, which usually takes anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks, is greatly reduced. We're hoping that we can actually get people hired and into positions within 3 to 4 weeks now.
What do you want to accomplish in the next 12 months of your operations? What specific outcomes are you looking for?
So just like Imaware and Jani came and presented to the HealthTie stakeholders, so we have presentations twice a month. We call them open innovation events. They're at 1 p.m. on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. And we have 30 minutes in which we invite an innovator to come in and just tell us about their product. And that is it's really sparked a lot of creativity and ideas and really opened people's minds as to what could possibly happen. But I want to go from like showing off great ideas to actually making them happen. So what I want in the next 7 months are actual pilot projects, gathering data in Alaska that shows what we could possibly do when we make changes. So that's my goal.
And I know that's happening. Tell us about the other pilot projects that are in the ground or going to be in the ground soon. You've told us about DSP Hire.
That's right. There's DSP Hire. Well, I'm hoping that Imaware. I'd like to connect Jani to a community, to an agency, to an organization in Alaska. So I'm definitely counting Imaware as part of one of our potential pilot projects. I'm also working on one focused in Matsu on improving telehealth for people who are part of the Daybreak program. One thing that you must be aware of is that many of the people who were receiving in-person services have had to quickly change and get those services online. And so we're building on that and trying to improve the way that they're receiving their telehealth services, and trying to make sure that if people can't come in personally through the behavioral services at Daybreak, that they're being connected virtually. So in addition to that one, we've got one, again, working with mental health in Alaska. In order to become a clinical psychologist or a counselor, you need to be supervised in person by a licensed therapist. And right now, as you know, that's very hard. But we have another entrepreneur who presented last year called Rachel McRickard, and she has a business called Motivo, and they can do that in person, or they can do the supervision virtually. And so I'm in the process of trying to work with the boards in Alaska that monitor that licensing to see if they will approve using Motivo. So there are a whole series of others, but what I would love to do, Joe, is maybe come back and tell you about those. They'd take a whole podcast, maybe tell you more about those another time.
You're welcome to take over the podcast. This goes out to most of Alaska's entrepreneurial community. If you guys want to take a shot at running the podcast some month, we'd love it.
Okay.
Aaron and I have plenty to tackle. One more question for you, Jacqueline, and then I think a good transition over to Jani. How have you found dealing with healthcare and putting pilot projects together in Alaska? I'm assuming there's some regulatory environment you have to navigate. Is there none? How is that working? Or do you just engage with the end user or the community and they have to figure out the regulations?
So one of the most difficult things about healthcare, and I'm sure that Jani can speak to this as well, is that there is a high level of regulation. And so there's a lot of trepidation about starting new things. The way that we are trying to do this is we are trying to open doors and get those initial pilot projects to show proof of concept. So, when we're doing that, there's a lot of upfront planning and connecting that needs to happen. Generally, though, I would say that in Alaska, we are very open to trying new things. And so usually if I can make the right connections and have people just have a conversation, there's so much goodwill and so much interest in trying to improve how these processes happen that it's really just opening those first doors. And I guess this really does bring me back as to why I really wanted to make sure that Imaware was a part of this podcast, is I'm just hoping that the right places that would be interested in trying to adopt something like Imaware in Alaska would, be open to a conversation with Jani.
I'm sure they would. And Jani, if you could remind us, how can folks find you online and look at all the variety of tests you have available?
Yeah, in two ways. We would love to connect with people, obviously through our website and our product platform, imaware.health. But also I'd love to connect with people individually, and I'm on LinkedIn and obviously on Twitter, and happy to support other entrepreneurs in their personal journeys. And, if I can help educate anybody, to avoid or to learn from some of the mistakes I've made to get here, that's what it's all about.
So I have a lot of questions for you. One is, how did you navigate the regulatory environment in computer, if you say you have a data background, you're a product person, in software, you can build things and generally launch them. Depends if you're in financial technology, probably not, but you're working in a heavily regulated environment. I can't just build my own test and sell it on a website through Shopify, right? Like, what did you have to do and how did you approach the regulatory environment?
Yeah, so a lot of this was, learned by seeing the unfortunate failure of Theranos and, all of the media attention that came around that, the book Bad Blood, which I had read, the HBO specials, which reinforced basically if you don't and are not transparent in this industry, if you're not sharing your data and you're not open to kind of having other doctors, look at this science and vet it, then you're going to get yourself in trouble, whether you are doing it maliciously or not. So when we formed the company, it became very easy to say, hey, we're going to do kind of everything differently. We're going to bring on board external independent advisory teams and doctors. So we're not going to hire doctors who might be, in any way, shape, or form motivated by financial gain. So we took that off the table. We said that we would publish our first test data and methods into peer review. We did that. And so we basically just kind of from the learnings of other companies that had failed, took those to heart and said that if we're going to try and make a change in this industry, recognize that it's a hard industry to make change in. So let's surround ourselves with really good practices and a lot of great people, back to the point of we're not going to solve this problem alone. And so we built up our advisory team, which brought years of experience from scientific and clinical and product and other, regulatory guidance perspectives. And my job was to kind of just distill all that in and help navigate the company in a way that made sense. And while we could, yes, build software and platform components really, really quickly, we took our time on making sure the science worked, making sure we did all of our validation data, made sure every lab had all of the kind of checks and balances and validation binders set up so that when the inevitable audit came, we passed those audits.
I'm also curious, you talk a lot, or previously you spoke on your medical advisory and that you've worked with a lot of folks with PhDs. And so did this product come out of a university? Did you help pull it out of a university, or did you create it with these folks sort of separately and build this advisory committee yourself?
No, it honestly was a little serendipitous, but I basically had met a doctor years earlier and just had mentioned something about the lack of a screening test. And it was, that small little hook that years later, basically through a friend of a friend, had said, you got to go back to this hospital and just talk to this person. That connection didn't know that I had actually already met that doctor. And I didn't know that doctor was researching that. So it was just like really kind of random events. And so when I was able to then go into the lab, because of my product background, people had asked me to just come in and weigh what it might be like to do something in tech. Like, how could we tech enable this science? It's just a really open-ended question. And then kind of it all just sort of connected after that. So when I saw it, and then we had that very kind of light bulb moment of, hey, if this is small volume and you can do this anywhere, why can't you do it at home? And furthermore, could this have helped in my brother's situation if he was able to get access to a test like this? The answer was yes. And then it literally was like light bulb moment, quit my day job and just like go all in on this. And it really happened that fast. I actually made the decision to quit my career, which was, really cool product design lead, building some really awesome products. And 24 hours later, I was out of that job, and building this company.
And so, serendipitous connection to the technology, you pursue the technology, you dive in head first. Now the question is resources.
Yeah.
How do you begin to gather resources? I guess if you have the technology and you're already working with a doctor, the other doctors won't necessarily shut the doors on you.
Yep.
But if I launched a medical company tomorrow, I would anticipate hearing a lot of no's. How did you start to get resources to build out your company?
Yeah, so there's a lot of no. And I think that's, I had worked, and kind of done a few other startups where I heard no a lot. So this time around, I was used to hearing no, but that didn't really dissuade us this time around. So we actually seeked investors, kind of all over the place. But we ended up, again, once you start to share that you have a vision and you have this mission, and people can kind of get addicted to that. While you've got naysayers and maybe 99% of people are saying and telling you the ways it won't work, some people are going to come along for the ride and say, like, I believe in you. I want to help you get there. And so introductions led to getting us in front of a venture capital group in Houston that actually shared the same belief that they felt while they're helping all these hospital systems develop new drugs and techniques and technology, that there could be this cheaper, better, faster preventative model that could be part of the solution. And so when we pitched the vision around how we think we could build cheaper, better, faster, preventative, proactive from a home screening perspective, they bought into it. So it's kind of just, you eventually, will score a goal on a number of shots that you take. So the more shots you take, the more likely to score a goal. So Wayne Gretzky, of course, said that. And my stance on this was we got a lot of no's, we got a lot of naysayers, we got a lot of turnaways from being able to pitch investor decks until we found that one. So persistent paid off. And then just getting the seed funding wasn't the answer, because now you had to build it. You had to scale it. You had to prove it worked. We had to prove the data and methods. We had to publish to peer review. So it's just like constant uphill battle. And it even is to this day, right? We're still obviously fighting that uphill battle. And so as an entrepreneur, it really is just don't give up, right? It's funny how you can will a lot of things into existence if you have a strong belief and surround yourself with people who also believe in that vision. So back to kind of the doctors that have come on board, we've had, if you look at our advisory team, these doctors have spent their entire career and they're coming on board to work with us for free. They don't want any compensation. They just literally want to help us succeed. They want to help us validate our science. They want to help put our tests into patients' hands that need it the most. And so that's amazing. And to have that support in the community is unbelievable.
Jani, to break it down even further, because I'm this type of person, what was the first piece of validation? It sounds like you have some external funding to some extent.
Yep.
Right. What was how far along did you have to be in life cycle before you received anything more than $100,000 in capital? Most times idea stage, generally, maybe medical is a different field, but idea stage companies really shouldn't be getting more than $100,000, generally speaking. But maybe not even that, probably not even that. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, your first little bit of seed capital, how much seed capital it took you to get to MVP, and kind of what validation you had to show the VCs to get funded.
Yeah. So the first check was, pretty small, really small, in fact. And the idea was that a bunch of gentlemen who had gone to the lab to get, PSA marker tests, the results that they got from their traditional blood work, when then tested from their finger, had the same result. And so you could basically therefore show that there was promise of the kind of the concept here that the information in blood can be, kind of extracted from almost anywhere. And you see this actually, it's true in hospitals. For some children, they even, will draw heel blood or earlobe blood. And so what we just showed with that small proof of concept is that instead of drawing vials of blood, you could get it from just several drops. And the information was just as, accurate and precise and repeatable. So that was kind of the proof of concept. The next check came when there was determining that there's actually a market for this. And so taking this approach and building a celiac disease test, like I mentioned, we didn't want to have any risk of false negatives and causing harm. But when we actually launched the celiac test, and we had lots of people actually come and buy the test from us on the first day, when we had partners and not-for-profits and bloggers and influencers who said, wow, we really want to help get this in the hands of people who've been struggling to get tested by their doctor or who have gone through years and years and years trying to get diagnosed. Celiac disease on average takes 5 to 6 years to get diagnosed. So if we could shorten that down to, a test that takes just several minutes and results back in several days, getting people to their doctor within days, we cut that, time frame of years down to days. So we saw market validation in celiac disease. And so then the next check came where we said, hey, we can expand this from celiac disease to cardio and all these other tests. And so that's how the checks kind of came. And so it was proving it worked, validating the market, and now moving into growth stage, adding 15 tests and really trying to, 10x our company this year.
Well, good luck to you, Jani. Let's close it out with some final thoughts from everybody. Final words of advice. Jacqueline, you're up, and then we'll go to Aaron.
Sure. I guess I would just welcome anybody who, like Jani, has an idea and they want to see how to get started to talk to HealthTie. And generally, I'm inspired by anyone like everyone we've spoken to here today about trying to improve how existing healthcare is done, not only in Alaska, but throughout the United States. So thank you very much, Joe, and thank you, Aaron, for the opportunity. It's been a super pleasure to be a part of this.
Jacqueline, you're so eloquent. It's always so hard to follow you. Final thoughts. I am also super proud to work with folks like Jacqueline, and she is a super connector. And so Alaska HealthTie, we're lucky to have you leading the charge and continuing to spur the growth of innovation and startups here.
Jani, final thoughts and just final thoughts on anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So while everything seems like there's turmoil and indecision and we don't know what the future holds, I actually believe this is the absolute best time to get into innovation, to disruption, to entrepreneurism. And so when you have people like Jacqueline who can steward and connect, when you've got every industry under basic attack, whether it's restaurants and doing curbside delivery to, every other industry you can imagine, that's going to be revisited, relooked at. This is the literal start of a disruption era, in my belief. So I think everyone has an equal footing and chance to get into a startup, to build their own startup, to pursue their ideas.
That's really well put. And thank you, Jani. And it's not, I know that innovation types say this a lot, but I think that if we look at companies that are thriving right now, and we look at how other companies just can't make it through this crisis, if we look at how technology companies are actually exceeding expectations because the technology can operate online 24/7 without personal interaction. And this is one of the first economic recessions that we're going to encounter where tech companies aren't going to get hit by a financial hammer. If anything, they're going to come out of this stronger. And I'm something of a tech skepticist. So these kind of sea change events generate a lot of turmoil and volatility. And in that sea of turmoil and volatility, I 100% agree with you, Jani. There will be opportunity for people to do things, especially if you're doing things and looking at it differently and thinking about not just what the world looks like right now, but what it looks like in 1, 2, and 5 years. So anyway, leaving that all behind us, final question, favorite question ever. Jani, tell us, what kind of cheesy, awful music do you love to listen to that nobody knows about? What are your pop delicious hits, Jani?
So I'm crazy. I can go from, country music to Van Halen to Nirvana to Beethoven, all on my Spotify track, and then literally end with an entire slew of reggaeton. So that's my Spotify list. I just love all music. And so if I had to put a song on right now, I actually probably would put my entire reggaeton crew on here, and I'd go listen to that for the next 20 minutes. Reminds me of being somewhere in Mexico, sunny, with not coronavirus, but Corona beer. So,
okay, Jacqueline, your cheesy music, tell us.
I have to say, I have a 13-year-old daughter who does nothing but TikToks. And so anything that's kind of just pop music is probably what I'm listening to these days. So anything from Lizzo to you name it, what's ever popular on the radio. So I'm terrible at TikTok dancing, though, she's shown me up every time. So
very cool. Someday, I've never used TikTok, so I will not engage in a TikTok dance contest. All right, Aaron, you can't hide. Nothing cool, Aaron. What do you got? Awful music.
I'm just so cool. I can't help it. I'm through my playlist right now. I recently downloaded, this is a throwback to my summers that I spent in Oklahoma in my preteen years. Deanna Carter Strawberry Wine.
All right.
That's mortifying. So there you go.
With strawberry wine and that mortification of Oklahoma years, 49SAF Pod calling it. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for hanging out.
So I've got my 3-year-old here who looks like he wants to weigh in. Let him say hi real quick.
Hi.